Ever catch yourself, like, getting frustrated when someone just can't seem to get going on something?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they're putting off a chore or they just freeze up when you ask them to do something.
Right.
So easy to just label that as laziness.
Yeah.
But what if I told you there's a whole other side to this, especially for people on the autism spectrum?
Okay.
Today, we're really diving deep into demand avoidance. And trust me, it's way more complex than it sounds.
Yeah, you're spot on. Demand avoidance is often mistaken for just like not wanting to do something.
Right.
But it's really a complicated response to anxiety.
Okay.
And getting why it happens is so important for supporting someone who's dealing with this.
So let's unpack this demand avoidance thing. What are we actually talking about here?
Basically, it's this pattern of resisting everyday requests or expectations.
Okay.
But, and this is key, this resistance usually comes from anxiety, not defiance.
Okay.
Imagine feeling so overwhelmed by like a simple request that your brain just slams on the brakes.
Wow.
It's like someone asking you to climb a mountain when you're already carrying a ton of bricks, you know?
Yeah.
That's what a simple request can feel like for someone with demand avoidance.
Wow, that analogy really paints a picture.
Right.
And it makes you realize how quickly we judge without knowing what's going on in someone's head.
Right.
I even found this quote in one of those articles you sent. Labeling someone with demand avoidance as lazy totally misses this whole interplay of anxiety and emotional responses.
Yeah, and that lazy label can actually make things worse. It's like adding another brick to that already heavy load, making the anxiety even stronger, and then they avoid things even more.
It's like a vicious cycle.
Exactly.
So if we ditch the lazy label, how can we even begin to understand these behaviors? I was reading about the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response.
Right.
Seems like it could be helpful here. Could you break that down for us, like how it relates to demand avoidance?
Sure. It's a great way to understand how people, especially those with autism, might react when demands feel overwhelming for them. Let's look at how each response type might actually look like demand avoidance.
Okay.
So with fight, for example, you might see outright refusal, arguing, even getting angry.
Right.
It's basically pushing back against a demand that feels like a threat.
So it's like that feeling of being cornered. You either lash out or shut down.
Exactly. And that actually leads us right into flight.
Okay.
This is when someone might physically leave, like walk out of a room.
Yeah.
Or they might zone out mentally just to escape the demand. It's about getting away from that anxiety.
So fight is pushing back. Flight is getting away. What about freeze?
Freeze is interesting.
Okay.
It's almost like their nervous system just locks up.
Oh, wow.
The person feels stuck, totally unable to even start the task or even explain how they feel.
So they understand what you're asking, but they're frozen.
Yeah, exactly. Their mind might want to do it, but the anxiety's like a wall they can't get over.
Wow. Okay, so that leaves fawning. This one seems harder to spot.
It definitely can be. Fawning is about complying outwardly to keep things calm, but inside they're super stressed. They might agree to the demand, but it takes a toll on them. They're sacrificing their own well-being.
Wow.
Basically, they're putting their needs aside to avoid conflict or upsetting you.
So say, like, a kid with demand avoidance is asked to clean their room. What would fawning even look like in that kind of situation?
Oh, perfect example. In that case, fawning might look like the child saying, okay, I will, but like with a big fake smile,
Yeah.
But then you might see them get really anxious while they're cleaning, maybe making excuses to avoid actually finishing.
Right.
Like on the surface, they're doing it, but inside they're a wreck, just pushing their own needs down to avoid like disappointing you.
That's kind of heartbreaking. To think that someone might be dealing with all that inside while trying to act okay on the outside.
Right.
And to your point earlier, someone just seeing them might just think they're being difficult, not seeing all that turmoil underneath.
Absolutely. And that's exactly why this whole fight, flight, freeze, fawn thing is so helpful, I think. It helps us see past those surface behaviors and recognize that what we might be seeing as laziness or being difficult, it's often just someone trying to cope with like really intense anxieties.
Like a whole different perspective.
Totally.
Okay, so we're ditching lazy and understanding that demand avoidance is often about anxiety and could look like all these different things.
Right.
That's a big shift. But what does it actually look like to support someone going through this?
Right.
Where do we even start?
That is the question, isn't it? And the good news is that there are some practical things we can do. First and foremost, and this is so key, we've got to recognize what's really going on. We need to come at this with empathy and be curious, not judgmental.
Yeah.
Instead of assuming they're lazy or defiant, we ask ourselves, what might be happening for this person that's causing them to react this way?
So it's about shifting from, like, what's wrong with you
Yeah.
to what's going on and how can I help?
Exactly. And a big part of that how is giving choices. Giving someone even a little bit of control can really help lower that anxiety. It could be as simple as letting them choose when they start something or how they want to approach it.
So it's about, like, empowering them, not just telling them what to do.
Yes. And creating a safe space is huge too. You've probably heard of sensory overload, but basically it's when someone feels totally overwhelmed by like lights, sounds, all that sensory input.
Right.
So creating a safe space might mean minimizing those things, offering breaks, or just being understanding of their needs.
Okay.
Remember, their resistance might not even be about the actual task, but about the anxiety it brings up.
It's about understanding that their, like, nervous system might work differently, so their responses to demands are going to be different too.
Yes. And with that understanding, we can start to tailor our support in a way that really matters.
Okay.
Instead of forcing compliance, which usually just makes things worse, we can collaborate.
Right.
That means working together to figure out solutions, making sure the person feels heard, and respecting their limits.
It sounds as communication is so important here.
Oh, it's everything. And remember, communication isn't just what we say, but how we say it. Using a calm tone, actually listening to what they're saying, and letting them know their feelings are valid, those things make a huge difference in building trust and easing anxiety.
It's like you're giving me this whole new way of seeing people, you know?
It really is, yeah.
It makes you realize how much we just, like, assume things
Okay.
about people and how that affects how we interact with them.
Yeah, for sure.
And the more we get this whole demand avoidance thing,
Yeah.
the better we can be at creating supportive environments, not just like at home, but at work too.
Absolutely.
And, you know, it's funny, this goes way beyond just people on the autism spectrum.
Right.
It's about realizing that everyone, like whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, has their own triggers
Right.
and their own ways of responding to demands.
For her.
Just because someone reacts differently than you'd expect, it doesn't mean they're trying to be difficult or that they're lazy.
Yeah, I totally agree.
This whole deep dive into demand avoidance has been so insightful.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a whole new way of understanding people.
Yeah.
It's like a reminder to just like lead with empathy
Yeah,
and to be curious instead of judgmental.
absolutely.
And to remember that we don't really know what's going on inside someone else's head.
Right, we can't know everything.
So as we wrap up this deep dive on demand avoidance,
Yeah.
I will leave everyone with this.
Okay.
The next time you're dealing with someone who seems resistant or avoidant,
Right.
just like take a second.
Yeah.
Instead of assuming things,
Mhm.
ask yourself, what might be the anxiety behind this?
Yeah.
How can I like be there for them and support them?
It makes such a difference.
You might be surprised by what happens when we choose understanding over judgment.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.